Okay, we will look first in here to Plato and a dialogue of his. You see the dates of Plato's life on the board. Plato was a student of Socrates. He claims to accurately record the conversations of his great teacher, and this is what dialogues are. They are conversations with Socrates as the main character. And the first dialogue that we will look at is called the Meno. It is mostly a conversation between Socrates and a young man named Menon. Now, Menon is from an area of Greece known as Thessaly, and specifically from a town in Thessaly known as Larissa. This is significant because this is an area where the teaching of the sophists were very popular. So Socrates will know what he's dealing with when he is speaking with Menon. Now, the dialogues will have a focus. There will be something that they're looking for. A question was posed early by Menon, and this will be the theme of the dialogue. And he asked Socrates, can virtue be taught? And now, Socrates and Plato, and let me stop just a second on what I said there. I will use Socrates and Plato interchangeably. We're not sure if Plato did actually record all of the conversations of Socrates that show up in his dialogues. We don't know that, or whether Plato basically fictionalized this and used Socrates as a character in this way. So we're not sure if it's Socrates actually saying this or if the idea is Plato's. That's never been completely solved. So sometimes I will say Socrates says, and sometimes I will say Plato says. So I treat them as pretty much the same thing. Okay. Can virtue be taught? Okay, before we get into that, I want to say that Socrates and Plato favor a type of reasoning that we call deductive reason. And with deductive reason, you try to quickly establish a first principle. You want to start with something that everyone knows or agrees is true. You start with that. And then you would make application of this truth until, now the opposite of this, and we're not going to worry about this today, the opposite of this is inductive reason, where you start by gathering facts until finally you can assert that something is true. But with deductive reason, and Socrates and Plato like deductive reason, you start with something that everyone agrees is true, and then you make application from there. So, when Menon asks, can virtue be taught? Socrates stops him and says the first thing we have to do is know what virtue is. In other words, we've got to start with that first principle. We have got to come up with a definition of virtue that we all agree to be true. And so he begins to question Menon, and this is the Socratic program here. If you seek to know the truth about something, you get there by using question and answer. And they're making little progress. Menon began by saying that yes, he could define virtue, no problem. But as Socrates asked him, it turns out that what Menon was talking about were particular virtues. He could say what courage is, what truthfulness is, these type of things. Socrates keeps stopping him, saying that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a general definition of virtue. And so Menon finally is forced to admit, and I read here from the dialogue, I have 1,000 times made long speeches about virtue before many a large audience, and good speeches too, as I was convinced. but now I have not a word to say at all as to what it is. Now this is very, very typical of the Socratic program. You will often start by someone thinking that they know something, and under questioning from Socrates, they finally have to come to the point where they admit they don't really know this. And but Socrates wishes to continue. And he obviously believes they can know what virtue is. But Menon is going to try to spring something of a trap on Socrates. This is going to be something that the sophists would be known for. And so, it says this, that they haven't made a lot of progress toward finding out what virtue is. And Menon now thinks that he's going to be clever, and he says, all right, how will you try to find out something, Socrates, when you have no notion at all what it is? Will you lay out before us a thing you don't know and then try to find it? Or, if at best you meet it by chance, how will you know this is that which you did not know? And Socrates is aware of this type of reasoning, and he says, of course, he would never try to find out what he knows because he knows it. And in that case, he needs no trying to find. Or what he does not know, because he does not know what he will try to find. So Socrates says, yes, I understand that type of argument. And Socrates now is going to give his answer. And what we're going to get is Plato's theory of knowledge. We're going to get here in just a second. And now this is Socrates with his answer to Meno about how you can know something that you had no previous knowledge of. And I read, they say that the soul of man is immortal, and sometimes it comes to an end, which they call death. And sometimes it is born again, but it is never destroyed. So Plato does suggest that there is something called reincarnation. If you will remember, the pre-Socratic philosopher Pythagoras had believed in reincarnation. Socrates continues. And since the soul is immortal and often born, having seen what is on earth and what is in the house of Hades, and everything, there is nothing it has not learned. So there is no wonder it can remember and about virtue and other things, because it knew about these things. For since all nature is akin, and the soul has learned everything, there is nothing to hinder a man, remembering one thing only, which men call learning, from himself finding out all else, if he is brave and does not weary in seeking. Now here comes the big part of what I've been reading. For seeking and learning is all remembrance. And this is a big part of Plato's epistemology, of his theory of knowledge, and that is that knowledge is remembering. We learned all of this before in past lives. We're born with all of this knowledge that we have. And it is purely a matter of our remembering this. This is a rather spectacular theory of knowledge that he gives. And now, and this is, we are looking at now what we would call Plato's epistemology, which is his theory of knowledge. And it would go something like this. There are two types of knowledge. There is knowledge of the facts of daily life. I have that up there under A. Now, it takes experience to learn about these things. Experience can yield facts. But this knowledge is subject to change because our experiences change. If I said there are 17 people in the, if we had a regular class room here, everyone in the auditorium, and I said there are 17 people in this room, that is a type, and you counted, and yes, there are 17 here. That's a type of knowledge, but you had to count. Okay, in other words, it had to jive with your experience here. And so the sophists appear to be right about certain knowledge, that we can't have certain knowledge. If there are 17 people in this room, have there always been 17 people in this room? Will there always be 17 people in this room? No. So the type of knowledge that we have gained there is subject to change because our experiences change. But Plato suggests, or Socrates will suggest here, that there's a second type of knowledge. And this we would call universal truth. And that is that which has always been true, is true now, and always will be true. It's permanent, it's universal knowledge. How is this truth learned? Not from experience, because experience yields changeable, uncertain knowledge. Socrates says, the soul always knew it. And this type of knowledge, and it becomes a big word now that I'm coming up with now. This is an important part of Plato's theory of knowledge, is that we possess a priori knowledge. That is knowledge independent of experience. You would not have had to experience these things to understand these because you were born with this knowledge.